Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I'm Richard Moses, president of the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, also known as LESPI. LESPI is a not-for-profit group formed in 2007 dedicated to preserving the historic Lower East Side, which includes the East Village, Lower East Side below Houston Street, Chinatown, Little Italy, and the Bowery. We're thrilled to have our program this evening, Faces in Stone, presented by Robert Arthur King and Vivian Ducat. Tonight you'll see a cornucopia of artistic riches, including many within Manhattan's Lower East Side. These include all types of architectural sculpture, faces, animals, flora, grotesques, you name it. They're all over our historic neighborhoods. All you have to do is look up and you'll see them. Although these treasures have typically been around for more than a century, they're actually very vulnerable and can be destroyed when landlords demolish their buildings or insensitively renovate or repair them. To protect our Lower East Side cultural and architectural heritage, including this ornamentation, LESPI, along with our sister organizations, have proposed several New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission designated historic districts in the Lower East Side, including a proposed district below Delancey Street around the Tenement Museum, one around Oliver Street at Henry Street, in the East Village at St. Mark's Place in the blocks of the north, and the east side of Tompkins Square Park, as well as several individual landmark sites. We now need the Landmarks Preservation Commission to move ahead on these proposed individual landmarks and historic districts. During the presentation, you can ask questions through Zoom's Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. We may not be able to answer all questions, but we'll do our best. We'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation, though you can enter the questions anytime they come to mind. Also, at the top of your screen, if you take your cursor and hover toward the right, you should see three groups of rectangles. If you hit the single rectangle, you can minimize the view of the panelists, myself included, so you can enjoy an unobstructed view of Vivian's film and Robert's presentation. If you don't see the rectangles, look for three dots on the top, should say more or something like that, then pick the option about minimizing the video panel. Finally, we want to take a quick poll so that we know where everybody lives. Don't worry, the polling is anonymous, but here goes. We'll give you the results of the poll at the very end of the presentation. We'll give everybody about a little less than a minute to do this. Okay, great, thank you. I now want to introduce my fellow LESPI board member, Helena and Draco, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We are so delighted that you could all join us tonight, and we do have a wonderful program for you with two excellent presenters. We'll start the evening with some words from filmmaker Vivian Ducat and a screening of her documentary Stonefaced, fabulous title for that film, followed by a discussion and slide presentation by architect Robert Arthur King. Vivian Ducat received her professional film training as a director in London through a program sponsored by the BBC, where she worked during the early years of her career. She has made over 20 long format films for both British and American television, for series such as The American Experience, The Story of English, and The Prize, and has made literally hundreds of short films for clients such as Columbia University, the Museum of the City of New York, the New York Historical Society, and the Library of Congress. Vivian also holds a master's degree in real estate development from the Graduate School of Architecture, Preservation, and Planning at Columbia University. Ms. Ducat is a preservationist as well as a filmmaker. She was awarded the Six to Celebrate in 2016 from the Historic Districts Council for her efforts to add a street to the Audubon Park Historic District in Lower Washington Heights, the district where she lives. The film we will see tonight, Stonefaced, is her first short feature documentary and is a wonderful introduction into the world and mind of the film's subject, Robert Arthur King. I am delighted to introduce to you Vivian Ducat.
Thank you, Helena. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I found my way to Robert. In the early 2000s, I was working at Columbia, actually creating multimedia attempts to sort of put content onto the web. And one of the people who changed my life, who I worked with, was the preservationist Andrew Dolkart, who we did a whole thing called the archaeology, no, the architecture and development of New York City. And I actually, that's what it caused me then to go to the real estate program. I ended up writing a master's thesis about the cutting up of New York City apartments during the 1930s. So my obsession started there. I had made a feature documentary during this period about an African American artist who tools leather and does these amazing tableaux about the Jim Crow South. And in the midst of making that film, I had this revelation that there's a genre out there of films that is lacking. That while Jews are always sort of portrayed as obsessive, intelligent, sort of crazy, passionate characters, films about African Americans tend to be people are lionized as civil rights workers or leaders or people in music or sports, and that they really needed that the other person I was making a film about, had that kind of obsessive quality, and I was sure that there would be other people like that out there too. To backtrack, in 2008, I had gone because of Andrew Dolkart, because of that interest in architecture and preservation, I'd gone to the National Preservation Conference in Tulsa as someone who had one of those tables to look for work on that subject. And I never got anything except that the Norton representative for Robert's book happened to be sitting opposite me. And I went through her books, and the only book that was really interesting to me was the one with Robert. The second day of this event, she goes, "Does anyone want my books? I'm not going to ship these back to New York." And it was like, oh my God, I'm a New Yorker. I was the first person up and out of my seat, and I grabbed Robert's book. So I got to know Robert. I'm backtracking to say I got someone to give me his number who was one of his students. I called Robert. I said I wanted to spend a day to get to know who Robert King is. He took me to his publisher. He answered a lot of my questions. He amused me no end. I thought he was a great character. I tried to get money to do something with him, and it failed. Well, when I made that other film that made me start to think about this genre of sort of obsessive characters who happen to be African American, who did I call? Of course, Robert King. And I said, "Want a film made about you?" And of course he said, "Yes, you'll see what a showman he is." So that was really the genesis of this film. I borrowed the money from Washington Heights nonprofit. I paid it back. And I had a wonderful time making this film. It was just, because I'm proud of this, it was made in 4 half days of shooting. I'm very proud of this idea, which I really learned in England, that you should be very austere with what you do. Don't film too much. Only Americans film too much. I want to be respected by my British friends. I did this film in a very short period of time and used almost all my material. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the film.
Okay, if you'll give me a moment. Robert, can you stop sharing your screen for a moment? Thank you. And we'll be able to start right now.
Look at those women up there. I never noticed them. Let's see which ones I can get. I took some classes several years ago. The course was called Women in Photography. And the goal was we had to photograph women. And I, people don't believe it, but I'm a little shy. So what I decided to do is photograph women in buildings. I got an A. Then I got a little obsessed with it, and I started photographing animals. Now I'm shooting stone flowers. I have so much fun walking around looking at these animals. And faces must be gorgeous at night. Like, oh, where have you? I didn't know you were here. Wow. How long have you been here? 18 what? Oh, wow. You're looking good. You know, for 120, you don't look bad at all. I'll take a picture of you. Smile. That's how it goes. It's not like Columbus, but you discover things like this hole here. I didn't know it was here. Many people don't know it's here. And look at the lions. This was a good find. These details that are in buildings done by these artisans is almost ignored. People don't really see them. And I want people to see them and give respect and understand that these artisans put a lot of work into it, and we should look at them and appreciate them. So, look exaggerated, but because they're all different, you're giving the indication they're not stock. Like I think this is a caricature of a real person. And this one over here, you can see it looks like mother and son, if you look close. And that would make sense, right? How you doing?
What do you want to know about it?
No, just taking, it looks like a mother and son on the building, the carvings, yes. See right below the window?
Yeah.
Look, mother and son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've been photographing faces on buildings for a few years.
History of these houses.
Pardon me?
There's a rich history. Of
Yeah, I know, I'm an architect, and I kind of,
Who are you?
my name, Robert King. I've lived here all my life. I have a love for Harlem. My father purchased a house on September 15th, 1939, and I just never moved. These houses were initially built as one-family homes, and then with the housing shortage after the First World War, many houses became rooming houses, so you had tenants. My father had several other houses in Harlem, and I would go with him to do repairs, fix things, and I got not interested. It was just part of what one did. When, you know, to clean the house, the toilet wasn't working, you had to repair the toilet, the bell's not working, and I used to enjoy it. My brother didn't particularly, but I did. The newest building on the block was 19 Hamilton Terrace, which is also known as the Delphi White House. This house was built in the early 50s, about 51, 52, by an architect by the name of Vertner W. Tandy. He was the first Black registered architect in New York State, which was a big deal at the time. I remember the house being built. I remember that. We were impressed, very impressed. In 37 was the florist. We called him Harry the Hat, because he always wore a hat. Terry, she lived in number 26. I did number 28. I worked in this house. And my grandmother lived in 31. And Mr. Bishop lived in 33. He was a policeman. Yeah. So I mean, that's you know, on a block. There were no trees. No trees on the block then. So it was great for stickball. It was like really great. Well, I went to public school, and after graduating from public school, I worked as an auto mechanic. And from there, I was not that happy, so I went to a community college to become an airplane mechanic. Well, it wasn't until I went to an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the exhibition was called A Rise of an American Architecture. And I fell in love. And then I knew I felt that was my destiny, to become an architect. That one. In the mid-'70s and late '70s, there weren't many jobs available. So what I started to do is I did surveys for architects. And I would go into abandoned buildings, measure them, and give them the survey. And it was quite dangerous. One building the building collapsed, and I went down 3 stories. And I broke the cartilages in both of my knees. And I've had several operations. I now have steel knees. One building where I was surveying, there were drugs in the building, and the fellow fired 7 shots at my friend and I got hit in the back. I stepped on a nail once, and I went through my foot. We went to the hospital, and the doctors asked me what kind of a nail was it. And I thought I was going to answer properly, so I said it was a 4-penny nail circa 1906. And they both looked at me. My friend said the nail was rusty, and I said to my friend, he didn't ask me that. Have everything. Hi, Sierra, Robert King calling. I know I'm calling you late. What's your Monday schedule like? Let me know, give me a call, send me a text, carry a pigeon, whatever works. Talk to you later. Morning, Pietro, how you doing? Okay, you got my email about Wednesday? When are they putting in the glass on the glass house? Okay, I'll see you tomorrow morning then. Okay, take care, Pietro. Bye. Hi, Dale. How you doing? Okay, listen, what about, what's Monday like for you? I know it's a holiday, but it's still a day. As an architect, I try to focus on how people perceive space, and I think that becomes important to enhance the space, to make one feel good about their environment. I think restoring buildings, which is more what I like to do, is really preserving American history. These brownstones to me were like a little jewelry box to make this little box perfect. Winston Churchill made the statement that people don't change spaces, spaces change people. And I heard that very early on in my study of architecture. And I thought about that, and space does change people. You can feel the space when you walk into it. Usually when I go to a building, I photograph roughly about 90 to 100 photographs every time. And I study the photographs, because sometimes walking through a building, one can miss something. Did you get, Maribel, you got the medallions?
Yeah, I got those, and I got the ones that I got to look at from time.
Yes.
And here we're thinking of 24 or 30?
24.
24.
Yeah, 24.
Yeah.
Working with a client, you get a feel for the client, of who they are, and I try to work around that so that the design represents them.
Pietro, I was asking the rest of the wood in here.
I see architecture as an art, and the art is not just in the design; it's really what goes on behind the wall. A new suit on the person, but what's inside? And in buildings, what's inside? What's hidden that I can't see? Okay. Yeah. Some buildings have been up for 200 years, and it was a good reason. I'd like to see the buildings that I work on be up for 200 years. Okay, this is a P-trap, the trap under a sink from an 1867 building. It's gorgeous. I still believe if you close your eyes and make a wish, 2 months later it'll come true, but you gotta believe. 420 Convent Avenue. Those cherubs there and these here, they will not remain steady for me. As often as I photograph them, they always seem to move. 420 Convent Avenue. And they're cute little faces too. Okay, and then there's these kids here at 450. If you look close, they're not cherubs. Those are the children, and it could be the children of the developer, the children of the owner. But those are definite children, and you notice none of them look alike, because if they were cherubs, they would mirror each other, and they're all different. I like to go out and spend a lot of time. My wife, my friends, they sometimes walk with me. They're a little bored. But I tell them how exciting it is to discover a face on a building, and sometimes wondering who is that face. Sometimes, like a scenario in my head, what was the artisan going through? What were they thinking? Why that particular face? 45 Monroe. So all the faces were different. Would the architect indicate the face? Did the owner indicate that face? There's no clip. Architects who did some of these buildings, there's no mention of the details. They talk about the overall design, there's discussion on the client, but not the detail. The cover of my first book, I have Viola. And I guess it got to be a thing because when I'm downtown, I like going over to see Viola. I mean, she's always there, straight-faced and all. The building, the corner, it's kind of a quasi-busy corner, and she's almost unnoticed. I think it was part of the building. It was expected. Like, where do you live? I live in the Viola. You have the name, so now the building has a little more character. You can almost feel the sense of your space and your building, because it's not like the building next door that may be called the Marianne. And now the modern buildings, my wife and I, we call them faceless. There's no faces, very little detail. They're boxes. And I think buildings deserve character. And I think the building does have character. Sometimes people take a little more pride in their building and the environment they're in. And it does an impact on the streetscape. I like to take photographs of places that normally one wouldn't see, or poor and depressed areas, and show there's a lot of beauty in all the neighborhoods around the city. There's so much in New York. The most unique one was the aquarium on 149th Street off 3rd Avenue. It's an office building, but you can see why I would like this. You can't find that anywhere. Nice. I think it was absolutely gorgeous. Notice when I take the fish, the sun comes out, because the fish know. I can just tell. Here, this building is South Grounds, and no one, they just walk by. Just walk by and not even notice. That's the pity. No one can just walk by.
That was just wonderful, Vivian. Thank you so very much. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. That was just terrific. So our next presenter, I was introduced to the work of our next presenter through a master woodcarver friend of mine. And when I told her that he would be joining us this evening, she was so excited that she said, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gonna meet a rock star." So no pressure, Robert, but you do have some fans out there tonight. So Robert Arthur King is a registered architect and certified interior designer. He holds a bachelor's degree of architecture from Columbia University and a postgraduate degree from the Architectural Association Graduate School in London. He established his architectural firm, Robert Arthur King Architect, in 1984, and has earned professional distinction as a specialist in the rehabilitation and preservation of historic buildings. In 2014, he was elevated to the College of Fellows in the American Institute of Architects, an honor bestowed on fewer than 1% of all registered architects in the country. Robert's passion for preservation has driven him to share with the public the important role that architectural stone carving has played in the history of US labor. His interest in these carvings has led him to travel the world, photographing the often overlooked beautiful figures that are embedded into the exteriors of buildings' facades. You could say that Mr. King is a man obsessed when it comes to gargoyles, grotesques, and other elements of building sculpture. His obsession with these figures has resulted in the publication of 3 books: Faces in Stone, Figures in Stone, and Animals in Stone. I am honored to introduce to you Robert Arthur King. Robert? Oh, you have to unmute. Robert, you have to unmute. We can't.
There. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen with you. And begin. Anyway, as Vivian had mentioned, I took this class in 1996 on women in architecture. I guess at that time, I wasn't as busy as I would like. I was only working about a 13-hour day. I had plenty of time, and as a good West Indian, you have to have more than one job. So at this class in women in photography, the assignment was to photograph women, interview them, and photograph them. And as I mentioned earlier, being a little shy, it just seemed awkward. And then I looked around and I noticed all these women in New York City just waiting to be photographed. They didn't have to sign a release. I didn't have to take them out to lunch or woo them in any way. They were all willing, and I also knew exactly where they were when I wanted to go back. And as you see Viola there on the left, she and I, we've bonded over the years. So after getting that class and I got my A, I said, wait a minute, why don't I start doing men? There are men around New York City. And I started photographing men. One of my objectives also was to show there is beauty in almost every neighborhood. Even in some of the neighborhoods that people think are very depressed, there's beauty. And after photographing men, let's look at animals. And I found some animals. The one that says Cedar Manor, those are pigeons in the Bronx. Never found a pigeon on any of the building in New York City. And I've covered, I would say, I have every borough, all 5 boroughs, but that I thought was really unique. And then I started going to different cities. Different cities. I'm a little behind myself. Philadelphia, Chicago, Cincinnati, Seattle, Washington, Albany, New York, Trenton, New York. That was a little tough to get, but I got Trenton, New York. And many of these buildings, by the way, are not famous and they're not landmarks, but they're beautiful in their own right. Some of my favorite buildings, this is on Wall Street, and many of these details indicated what went on or the business of the building. And obviously this company, I felt, was in the shipping industry. Rockefeller Center, right across from St. Patrick's Cathedral. No one looks up, but there's a whole group of fantastic details right across from St. Patrick's. One of the things I usually don't shoot are churches, mosques, synagogues, and government buildings. But while I was in Barcelona, I had to shoot a church. These women are on Webster Avenue in East Tremont. The building is in terrible condition, and my fear is these details will be destroyed or discarded. One of the things that I've gotten to do as I photograph buildings, this is right across from the New York Public Library. When someone's birthday comes up that I know in July, I send them a stone figure of July, or in August. I have all 12 months. So it makes a nice Christmas birthday present for different people. On Valentine's Day, this is what I send out. I was in Parkchester housing development, and it was like a whole new world for me, seeing all the details on all the buildings. And the buildings are really well kept, and I think that people had a lot of pride in their building. Some of these have been removed, and you can see the people are extremely irritated by that. On Mother's Day and Father's Day, this is what I send to all my friends. Also, many of my pictures are also on Facebook, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. But this also makes a nice little gift for everyone. And this on Parkchester, I sent to some of my older friends of the past, of course. This I send to my architect friends on their birthdays, and just to remind them that they're architects. After exhausting many cities in the United, not many cities, but a number of cities in the United States, I befriended a friend of mine I hadn't spoken to in over 30 years. We got together, and her husband came to the United States, and then they made arrangements for me to go to cities in Europe. And these are in Europe. There's Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Madrid. One of the things that I did while taking photographs of these details, usually the winter time is the best. Beside the sun, there are very few trees. So I really have better access to the details. In the United States, I usually photograph on Sunday morning because there are not many people around. And in Europe, I do it during the week because people are so busy, they ignore me, and I can take my pictures. Also in Europe, I would look for where the railroad station is, and that's where many of the older buildings are. Helsinki, Paris, Barcelona, Oslo, Lisbon, Warsaw, Stockholm. These are all different pictures that I've taken. I'm going to show you some of my favorites which are coming up. In Amsterdam, this is a simple 4-story apartment building. And I thought the carvings on these, the details on this is magnificent. Very rare, fine condition building. Looks like about being in the 1930s. This is an Art Deco building in Amsterdam, also near the railroad station. This was an office building, and that woman on the right, she is over the door. And there's no indication with the animals and her of what, I could not tell what initially why the building was built or what the main business was, but it was obviously currently an office building. While in Berlin, this is a school. Now many of these, this is on about the 8th story of the building. So usually I have 2 cameras, a wide angle and a photo angle. So at this I had to go about, I'd say, 1.5 blocks away to take it so you don't see it. It looks like I'm really right on it, but this is how it looks. This is how it looks. And with the little cherubs. I thought this was a great find. And you can see by the vision of the stonework, this was probably done in a factory and then shipped to be put onto the site. In Copenhagen, this is the Carlsberg beer Factory Harvard Beer Museum. And for some reason, they have a variety of animals on the lower level. And again, the carvings are gorgeous. This building in Copenhagen, and the other thing I'll mention on this, very seldom do I ever find 3 owls. Usually there's just one. So I thought, and I found one here in Copenhagen and also in Warsaw. Currently this building is an office building, but I believe at one time it possibly was a school building. In Helsinki, this is an office building, and why they have this type of figures on, it's a mystery. And talking to the people there, they don't know. They don't know. Also in Helsinki, this is one of my favorites from Helsinki. This is a school, but it was on a hill looking up. So I had to go approximately 2 blocks away to get this photograph. But the carving, and obviously 1904, but I thought the carving was absolutely gorgeous. And I gave a presentation to the Finnish embassy, and they told me they found out it was a school building. This building in Lisbon, this currently is a department store, but it's very obvious this was a theater at one time. And there's several carvings like this on the upper floor of the theater. And this also in the same neighborhood, which is now the Hard Rock Cafe. So as you can see, they maintained the facade. When I was in Madrid, I was walking along the street, the sun was just about to hit these 2 faces. There's several of them. And across the street was a construction site. So I had to explain to the contractors, they had to stop work so I could take a picture. They spoke no English, I spoke no Italian, but after several minutes, they acquiesced, and I got my shots there. Notice the eyes, the carvings on the eyes. One of the things I've discovered in traveling is the eyes change. And there's speculation on my part that I think that more reflection of the school in which the stonecutter was trained. While in Oslo, this is on the city hall, which I usually don't photograph. Now the photo on the detail on the right, that it shows a prostitute, a John, and a pimp. And it's from a book by Kirsten Kjog, who wrote this book. And I believe they put this on the building because at one time, near the hotel, city hall, it was a red light district. Speculating on my part, of course. In Paris, right across from the Eiffel's Tower, on this museum, you see these carvings. But one of the interesting things I found when I was in Paris, what they show is, look, and the lower portion of the detail, you'll see the initials of the carver, MG. In Stockholm, this is the post office. It was built in 1906, but they already are indicating regarding airmail. And this building now is an office building, but they restored every detail on the building. And this is in the main entrance of the building. And you see below, you'll see somewhat what the building looks like. But this I thought was absolutely unique and expresses mail. When I was in Turku, which is in Finland, this church had mushrooms, and the people in the church, they didn't really know why, but mushrooms became a big staple during this time. This building was built approximately in 1840. Turku was the capital of Finland, and the Finnish war between Finland and Russia, Finland lost, Russia took over, and then the capital was moved from Turku, which is on the west coast, to Helsinki on the east coast. This is in Warsaw. It's a 3-story building, apartments above, and different restaurants and shops below. And one could always say, why this detail? It doesn't really matter. They're gorgeous, and they're intact. In London, it's now a hotel, but I believe it was a home for women. Again, this building, I would say somewhere prior to World War I. This is one of my favorite details in London. And when I was arriving in London and took the train, walking to the hotel, I saw this detail. I unpacked my luggage in the street and I had to photograph it. Because not that they would tear it down by the time I got to the hotel, but one never knows. In the US, I tried to cover every neighborhood in New York, especially the poor neighborhoods in New York. And the South Bronx, Harlem, Bedford-Side, and I have many of the details in the buildings in America started really after the Beaux-Arts period became very popular, roughly about the 1870s. And that's when faces seemed to be put on. One of the things in the Lower East Side, Jacob Riis's book, How the Other Half Lives, gives a very good description of life on the Lower East Side. And this is categorized by the number of the building, not by street. And you see this figure is slightly Asian on the building. Another one. And some of these have not been maintained, which is very obvious, unfortunately. Yeah. And notice the eyes are blank. And this one. And some of the figures, the mouths or the features are exaggerated. One of the other interesting details, which I don't show in here, is on the Woolworth building. As one enters the main entry of the building, on the left-hand side, about 2/3 up, you'll see a man with his tongue out, sticking out at the audience. And this figure, which repeats itself on several buildings, because many of these were factory done and some were custom. This is a factory done building. And again, this detail I've only found in the Lower East Side, nowhere else. Characters. And here she is again, or he, whatever the case may be. And you can see the repair, the metal work has deteriorated. The birds have done a fantastic job on them. And who is this? No one knows. A child. This figure comes up many times, again, only on the Lower East Side. And these also, I've not found anywhere else in the city. And this, I believe, is from Jacob Riis's book, is where the African Americans lived. Why the horns? But the other interesting thing about this detail, it repeats itself in another building. A little scary. Many of the details in buildings were to be admired from the building across the street. So there was a little, I wouldn't say a competition, but one was to show what their building had, and you could see it from across the street. Is that the entry of the building? This building had several different faces, and I believe it was the family of the developer. The same building in 45 Monroe. On Orchard Street. Sometimes interesting when I'm taking these photographs, a crowd gathers around wondering what I am photographing. And I don't like asking questions, I just like to photograph. So I usually pretend I don't speak English. And it seems to work, so I get to be left alone. Again, this is probably, again, more of an Asian motif. This person is all over the Lower East Side. I believe is either the cantor or the rabbi. I have no photographs. The minimum research I've done, I found absolutely nothing. But it's just my belief because of its face and the hat, but also this is he, and I believe this is his wife. And the reason is they show up on several buildings on the Lower East Side. No, and I've not found it anywhere else in New York City. Madison Street. On Madison Street, this building, these stoneworks were done in brownstone, so you'll notice the decay. But you can make out the hat, which almost looks like a nurse's hat, and the bird on top of her hat. The same building. It was lack of maintenance with this row of buildings. Again, either the old law tenements, houses which really started from 1867 to 1901, and then the new law tenement, which had more so to do with the layout of the building for health purposes. Here he is again. And there she is again. There he is again. There she is again. They pop up all over the Lower East Side. I have so many pictures of the two of them that it's unique. And I think this was also a little different, but again, the hat. A little scary on the eyes. This is the very first picture I took in 1996 in the Lower East Side. I just had to show it. And there she is, and there he is. There she is again. And then earlier on one of the streets, same figure, which looks somewhat like a Native American, but I'm not sure. Obviously, this angle, I couldn't go back far enough. Sometimes other buildings are in the way. Again, the face again, and her again. This building on Madison Street, usually when I'm walking along Madison Street, I walk on this side, or the odd number side of the street. So one day, I don't know why, I walked on the other side of the street and saw this, which I thought was absolutely unique, and it's nowhere else, anywhere else that I could find it. And on this one, on the same building, you have that tablet which says the Boston Terracotta Company, built in 1901, and the sculptor initials RP. And again, that's in the United States. I found that to be a rare find. There he is again. There she is again. Again, the eyes are a little different sometimes, varying. I guess that depended on the sculptor. And this was the post office, which actually more of a 1930s or 40s building, and showing Mercury in the building. Again, this one repeats itself in several buildings. There he is. There she is. Her eyes are a little different on this one. Again, sometimes some of the sculptors, which I do think had a sense of humor, would do things like this with a large tongue. And for what reason? It's a guess. There he is. There she is. In many cases, they were on the same building. Again, the eyes. Slight exaggeration. Now, this detail on Henry Street is also the same detail is on Prince Street, and also right across from Gracie Mansion in Manhattan. There he is again. There she is again. This is Viola, which I think you all know, and I like going down to see her. There was a movie out in 1947 called My Brother Talks to Horses. Fred Zimmerman was the director, And I sometimes feel some of these details talk to me. Well, I don't feel, I actually can kind of hear them, but I really can't admit that in public. There he is. There she is. And another, maybe a nurse, I'm not sure. There he is again. There she is. I don't think that's him, but a slight exaggeration. But there she is. There he is on a different building. And this was, again, the same detail on Hester Street, little slightly different condition. Usually twice a year, I travel to Europe. And this year, being with the pandemic, I'm limited. And I'm on City Island and I'm not leaving. So it's very difficult to find things in stone faces. So just lately, I've been trying to find the man in the moon, and if there's anybody on the sun, can they take a look? In 2006, I was on York Avenue, walking around that area on the east side, and I came across this building, which had basically explorers. They had ships, different explorers, and on the upper floor, I got this explorer. I went as far back as I could. I thought it was great. Then in 2009, because I try to go back to different neighborhoods, I saw this. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And I had to look around because maybe I was wrong about the building. And my first reaction is to call 911 because I thought about making a citizen's arrest because they can't do this. This is public art. I appreciated that detail. I contacted my attorney and told him what can be done. There's a Visual Artists' Rights Act of 1990. Can we impose this and have them put it back, or at least somebody needs some jail time? My attorney said, let me look into it. That was about 1909. And I called him again. He said, I'm kind of busy, but I will get back to you. It's because of this is why we need to have these details preserved. And I know the police department is about defunding, but I think they should create building detail squad to make sure that these details no longer get destroyed. I got 3 books. I had an exhibition at my school, and I've also had exhibitions here on City Island. And I walked in the lobby of the school one day, and this woman, we started talking, and she said, I'd like to see your photographs. I go to her office. She worked for Norton. She said, how would you like to do a book? Well, I obviously didn't think she was talking to me. And she said, no, you. I said, sure, why not? So I got animals, faces in stone, animals in stone, and figures in stone as a combination of the 2 books. Jane Jacobs wrote a book on the death and life of great American cities. These details are part of the city and should be preserved. Paul Goldberg once said, with regard to the details, we won't miss them until they're gone. And many of them currently are gone. And my message to all of you, keep looking up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions and some comments. So we can go through all of them sort of in the order that we got them. First of all, someone wanted to call out the carved alligators at 55 Broadway. So I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Out the Alvin building, yes. It's on the southeast corner of 58th Street. Gorgeous.
A resident of Harlem mentioned or asked if there is a dated inventory of local ornament.
Not that I know of.
I would think the one way that you could figure it out, at least for buildings in historic districts, is to look at the Landmarks Commission's designation report. that district, and they'll typically have the date of the building, which is most likely the date of the ornamentation. Someone wanted to call out the great architecture and ornament in Prague. Another person asked, why do architects put so much ornaments so high up on the buildings?
So that you could see it from the building across the street. That was the reason. I forgot to mention, I almost had a building to do in Brooklyn. It was an empty lot in a historic district, so I had to design an historic building. I found a photograph of the building. It was 1857. And what I was going to do is put my wife's face on the building. But I didn't get the commission, so that was that.
Okay. One question is, Robert, whether you know the National School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry in Paris. Someone was there in the 90s and photographed it.
No.
Okay. Someone else asked, what does factory done face mean?
Well, it's a stock item. You take it off the shelf. They do several of them.
Someone else wants to call attention to a book called Green Men about grotesques.
Green Men, yes. I'm familiar with that book. Yes.
Someone else asked, is there any way of identifying the sculptors who created these works?
I have the grandson who worked on the Vanderbilt mansions contacted me and gave me a lot of information on the different sculptors, the labor force, the actual stone cutters. And so I got a lot of information. And also, I know many of them were different ethnic groups. They weren't all one Italians or whatever, as many people think, but there were different ethnic groups and the pay scale and everything else. But it was really, that was an eye-opener for myself.
Fascinating to see. And also, I guess, you know, this person was also interested on any records of what inspired them, you know.
Well, I think it was part of the time. It just, you built a building that was something you just did. It wasn't, I don't think, mandatory or someone pressured anyone to do it. It was just, you did a building, you put a face, an animal, flowers, something on the building to give the building character. It's almost like makeup. I think on Louis Sullivan's buildings, he talks about, it gives an expression of the building as opposed to a blank face, which is what we have now with glass boxes. So now you have the building says something to you. And so that gives a little more pride in the building, and people usually maintain a building which has pride. And a good example of that is the development in Parkchester.
And last question is, it's the last question. No, we got some more actually. False alarm. Have you ever looked at the Lewis Morris apartments on the concourse near Tremont Avenue in the Bronx? My grandmother lived there, but I don't remember how it looked. At one time it was quite grand, but not when she lived there.
Where in the Bronx?
Lewis Morris apartments on the concourse near Tremont Avenue.
Yeah, I go by, usually the name of I go by the address. I've probably seen it and photographed it. I have about 15,000 photographs. So I have a lot. So I'd have to, if I get the address, I could find it.
Great. Someone asked if we'll be able to share the presentation. We got some very nice feedback, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Okay, on the presentation tonight, so that was nice to see. And someone asked if we could share it, and yes, I'll be going over that in just a minute, how that will work. Have you ever found the identity of any of the craftsmen? I guess that's similar to what was asked before.
Yes.
Do you know of the face on the building on Grand Street, just west of the Bowery, on the south side of Grand Street?
I have to look at it. Yeah.
Someone wrote, I think I will never look at buildings the same way. There used to be a building on Essex Street near Stanton called Posnick Furniture and had amazing cameo decorations on them. It was destroyed. Don't know if you saw that on the Lower East Side before it came down.
Depending on the year. I did the Lower East Side in about 2005, 2003 to 5. when I cover that neighborhood. I just like everybody to know I don't do this for money. This is my hobby, and and I love doing it, and I want to make something of it, not a living, but make an impact for everybody to appreciate this.
So someone who I think may be a friend of yours, Robert, my understanding is that some of the cheaper buildings would order their ornament and details from catalogs. Could that account for the ubiquity of the rabbi and his wife?
Possibly.
We
Or
noticed
the other thing I may say, it just be not that they ordered it, but it would say to pay homage to the rabbi and his wife, to give them a presence. I think that would more and make them, everybody would be reminded of their religious responsibilities.
someone asked, have you noticed how many of these sculptures can be found in Venice?
Not been to Venice yet. I was going to Prague this summer, but that's that. Venice is on my list, though.
Okay, good. Maybe we can cover that the next time.
Yes.
Keep looking up. Thank you. I tell all my carving students just that. I'm also obsessed with these carved figures and beautiful details in our urban environment. I think of them as guardian figures watching us over centuries as we may fly past. I'm one of the few New Yorkers who does look at these buildings as I walk around, but thank you for documenting them. Have you considered some of the mosaics on the buildings?
Yes.
I want to do a book called Look Up New York, but you're basically doing that.
Okay.
Do you know if any woman created stone figures?
There were women in the factories. Yeah. But also like Bethesda Fountain. I can't remember Emma. I can't remember her last name, but that was the first commission by an artist to do a sculpture.
Were the factory carvings carved or cast?
I think they were carved. I think. I'm not sure.
Someone wrote in to say that her grandfather was a stone carver in New York City in early 20th century. Okay. Weren't gargoyle motifs supposed to ward off evil?
Yeah, that's why in churches. And Gaudi's building is one of the best examples of that, because many of the angels are looking up and all the devils and the snakes are looking down. So there was symbolism. A lot of these symbols, like in Trenton, New Jersey, there was a book over a store, it's a bookstore, because they started because many people could not read. So this was a way to indicate what went on in the building.
More kudos. Got a lot of kudos. I didn't read all of them, but very nice. Thank you, everybody who wrote in nice words. Very much appreciated. And someone mentioned that Emma Stubbins.
Stebbins, that's it. Emma Stebbins, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right.
All right, excellent. So,
her brother was on the commission, is why she got the job.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, right. That was another tidbit.
That helps, that kind of thing.
Yeah, every time.
Unfortunately, yes. So we have poll results for those of you who are curious, because I know we have people coming from all over. About a quarter of the people are from the Lower East Side. About half are from New York City, outside the Lower East Side. About 15% from the tri-state area, and another 10% the U.S. Outside the tri-state area. So that's similar to what we often see in these webinars. So I want to thank both of you, Vivian and Robert, for phenomenal presentations. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
A great reminder to everybody to look up as often as possible, without tripping on something. And I want to thank all of you, our audience, for joining us tonight. And those of you who missed some or all of this evening's presentation, we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. We also have other past webinars posted on that channel that you might find interesting as well. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, it'll come up. Also, if you go to our website, which you'll see www.lespi-nyc.org, which is right above the very bottom of your screen right now, you'll see a link to our YouTube website and webinars that are posted there. So also please keep your eyes open for the invitation to our August 6th webinar on Rose Schneiderman, women's suffrage in the Lower East Side. This is also a free event. And August is the 100th anniversary of the signing of the 19th Amendment, granting women's suffrage. So this is going to be a very special celebration. One thing I want to say finally is, although these are difficult times, please consider making a donation today to LESPI. We need donations to help us to continue to produce webinars such as this one, and also to do our landmarking advocacy work. You can find a donate button on your original invitation to this event, or by going to www.lesbi-nyc.org, which again is right above the bottom of your screen. I want to thank everybody again for attending, and please have a good night and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.